E nā mana, e nā iwi, e nā waka, e rauranga tēnā mā tihei Māori ora. Tēnā koutou, tēnā tata katoa. So it's a great privilege to be invited here today to talk about the New Zealand story. And I do get to talk a lot about the New Zealand story as I go into international markets. I don't talk too much about it at home, and I definitely don't talk about it with a group of sports people. So you got me stretched out of my comfort zone here today, which is good. So I've sort of posed it really as a question. And what I'd like to do throughout the course of the session is try and sort of crowdsource some of the answers to this amongst the group. So let's just do a bit of an ambitious experimentation over the course of the session. But just before I start, just to tell you a story of myself. So the last couple of weeks I've been in Saudi Arabia and Iran, as I do get to travel quite a bit around the world. And you know, these places feel very, very different to New Zealand. So they're not just hot and deserty, but you know, you've got a woman with headscarves, and in Saudi Arabia with full burqas, and all you can see is the slits into their face. Tehran's very polluted, so you're sucking on sort of diesel most of the day. When we were in Saudi Arabia, there were missiles coming over from Yemen, shot out of the sky by the trusty Patriot missiles supplied by the US. When we were in Iran, Trump announced the restoring of sanctions into Iran. And at the same time, there was a big scrap going on between Israel and Syria, also involving Iran. So I came home and I flew into Wellington, and you might have seen over the weekend, and us Wellingtonians of course know this, voted as the most livable city in the world. Yeah, give Wellington a high five, yeah. So we flew into the most livable city in the world, you know, touching down across the south coast, clean, green, rocky, plenty of powers out there, I know, because I live on the south coast, into a country that's a pretty amazing country. And I thought to myself, you know, really the point of difference between New Zealand and many parts of the world is actually getting bigger, not smaller. We have, in fact, got a very good and important country story to tell. And it's with that optimism that I talk to you here today. So, let's get into it. So, first of all, yeah, storytelling, it's both an ancient art and a very modern art as well. The modern leader tells stories. The modern company tells stories, the modern team tells a story, and the modern country tells a story as well. And the evidence is that storytelling can be enormously powerful and value-adding for a country. If you increase your country reputation by 1%, you can grow the value of the internationally facing part of your economy by 8%. It's because that, you know, when you tell stories, the companies and other people who rely on those stories are sort of rising on the tide of that story. It creates a halo effect for people, and ultimately creates value in these marketplaces. And so storytelling actually is very important. I just also want to make a distinction between a brand and storytelling. And there's lots of countries around the world who have who built up their brands. There's a campaign called the Great Campaign in the UK. If you've seen that, they've got great investment, they've got great technology, they've got great arts, they've got great sports, everything is absolutely great about it. They've got in India, got the Incredible India, Australia Unlimited, More Fun in the Philippines. So these are all brands that countries are building up as a way of describing the way they want the world to see them. But the truth of the matter is that stories come from the authentic truth about who a country is. So, you know, Brexit has got more to do with Britain's current reputation in the world than a $50 million a year brand campaign about how great England is. Or, you know, the recent incident with cricket. I'm not offending anyone hopefully here today. And the piece of yellow tape probably had more to do with Australia's reputation than the entire spend on Australia Unlimited. So the point about it is that what stories about countries do is distill what the authentic truth of the country is, and then shine a light on that authentic truth. So you can elaborate on who a country is, but you can't create a meaning that is not there. So that means the question for us then is what is the authentic truth of this country that we all live in? And the good news is that we've actually got really great raw material. If you go on the New Zealand Story website, and there's a group of people in New Zealand called the New Zealand Story Group, that went onto the website, and there's 97 different sort of ranking systems in there. I just obviously went and picked out some of the better ones, but hopefully you can read them on the screen there, but it's a really interesting list of pretty top-class rankings in the world. And what's really interesting about this is the breadth of those rankings. You've got business rankings, you've got human freedom, you've got prosperity, you've even got happiness, number 8, that was pretty cool. And then I went on to Dr. Google and found our Olympic medals per capita, which I thought was a pretty good number as well, at 4th there in the world. So I think, we have got some very good raw material as a country, and it goes back to my earlier story about Iran and Saudi Arabia and New Zealand. Increasingly, we've got a massive point of difference with the rest of the world and the quality and the essence of what this country is. Now, I think to say that is not to say that we haven't got our dilemmas, because we have. We've got some pretty nasty stats in New Zealand on some of our mental health, some of our teenage mental health, some of our child abuse statistics, some of our incest actually, some of our alcoholism, some of our domestic violence, and some of our recent stories of what's going on with the waterways. So we've got a definite dark and shadowy underbelly, and I'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. But nevertheless, I think on balance, it's still a very good and a very strong country story. Now, over the course of the last almost 2 decades, we've been running the 100% Pure campaign that everyone in the room would have heard about. It's been called the most successful tourism attraction strategy in the world. It costs about $110 million a year to run, but it was never designed to be a country story, and it's still not a country story now. What it's designed to do is to attract people to New Zealand and share really the essence of the natural landscape. I know Tourism New Zealand get very, very concerned about the fact that it gets dressed up as a country story, because it is not. So it's very important that we sort of think about our country story in a much broader way than just our natural environment. Okay, so this is when we take a pause, and you're going to get to work for a couple of minutes. And I want you to think in your own minds to yourselves, what do you think are the essential key ingredients of our country story? Those attributes about our country that you think that make us special and authentically true and different. Now, the way I want you to do this, you got 2 minutes, and in that 2 minutes, you're going to write down as an individual 4 words on a bit of paper, 4 attributes you can think of, and then you're going to have 3 minutes to share those in your group, and then we're going to take the microphone around and just pick on a couple of groups and see what they've come up with. Can I have someone with a roving mic there somewhere as well? So, 2 minutes starting now. 4 words. You can pick it on. You're obviously a very high performance sports people because you finished already. Okay, so I'll give you about 3 minutes in your group. So each person should have 4 words down there. In your group, 3 minutes. See if you can distill out what the common words there are around your table. 3 minutes. Okay, we'll call that quits there. So hopefully, due to your amazing consensus-seeking powers in your group, you've managed to generate, as a group, a few different attributes, a few different words to describe what you think the story of the country is. So, Linda, why don't we try that back table? That one with Steve Cottrell on it down there. Why don't we try that table?
You're first. 3 words.
Steve Chu told me to use his words, which were... look, we had an eclectic mix of words, but I'm going to go curious, freedom...
That's 3.
You just want to... Sorry. Okay, there you go. Curious, welcoming, freedom.
Excellent.
Okay, very good.
This one?
Yep.
Okay, this table.
Oh, I'm running down, you have. We had water, attitude and active.
Hold on, here we go. And we'll do, how about this table?
Cool.
Sort of friendly, relaxed, safe, and then something we couldn't quite put in one word around the wonderful environment.
Something around the wonderful environment, yep.
This table over here. Oh, you can do it, you can do it.
Friendly. What did we have? Natural, active, diversity, egalitarianism.
Big words.
Yeah, they went long, didn't they?
Not what I was expecting. Right, over
Okay,
here.
very good, yep.
Water, youthful, and isolated, remote, in a positive way.
The age of the population or the age of the country?
The age of the country.
Yeah, got it.
More?
Okay, yeah, let's go. Two more.
We've got innovation, nature, safe, unique.
Innovation, nature, safe, unique. 4. Okay, one more table. I'll come round here. Hold on a second. Cut into the middle. Yes.
Thanks.
We had honesty, outdoors or lifestyle, and innovative.
Okay, very cool. Let's so you can see what we're grappling with. It's a lot of breadth in the story, isn't there? So you've got something to do with the natural environment there as one of the pillars. There's something about how we are with people, our welcoming nature. But there's quite an interesting one around curiosity, innovation as well. That sits there inside, behind the country story as well. And of course, one of the great things about our country story, it's actually a very broad country story. And that's part of the strength of it, but it makes it very hard to tell a story around it when it hasn't got just one finite, tight point to it. But let me just talk to you about some of the research about the exact exercise you just did then. We did in quite a scientific way and did a reasonably big piece of research about it. And we discovered 3 essential pillars to the country story, which really amount to not the story, but what the 3 essential truths about who we are as a country. The first one was named integrity, actually. And it goes to, it's not just the sort of transparency and corruption and very good quality use of public finances and that sort of stuff, which is all right, first in the world. But if you look over the sort of social history of the country, you see enormous acts of integrity of a group of people looking after its own people. First to give women the vote, one of the first industrial conciliation and arbitration systems, and this is back in the 1800s. First welfare state in 1935, first ACC, a nuclear-free position, a position on apartheid. More recently, the way we've gone after the treaty settlements as a country. And now, we've announced this predator-free 2050, which is really interesting, a country announcing it wants to rid itself of rats. I mean, rats is one of the longest-term sort of predators of mankind. You've got a country here saying it wants to get itself rid of rats. And then, the more recent one, the carbon-free 2050. So we've got a long, sort of very proud history of what I would call high integrity acts towards people. And I don't think the story here is one just of those acts, but if you look over time, this is a country that will solve its problems over time. So it's really, ultimately, it's about, in a high integrity way, and now the oldest democracy in the world. If you think that, if you say that universal suffrage is one of the definitions of democracy, then we are, in fact, the oldest democracy in the world. And this democracy has, from where it's positioned in the world, solved its problems over time, which is why I think we can be optimistic about teenage suicide and optimistic about some of our really bad stats around children and some of those things. Because over time, over generations, I think we will solve our problems. So that's the sort of integrity pillar of the story. The second thing is what we called kaitiaki. It was really interesting when we were testing this internationally, even though this is a Māori word, this is a word that overseas ranked very, very highly. And the story here is not just our natural environment. You could hear it in the feedback that was coming through. It's just not the fact that it's a good-looking place. It is a good-looking place, but there's good-looking places all over the world. I mean, go to Chile or go to Norway or go to Canada or, even in Tehran, there was beautiful mountains all around. So there's beautiful places all over this world, but it's our relationship to the place. And once again, over generations, do we look after the place? Which where you dial up things like our sustainable fisheries regime, our standards on animal welfare that have evolved throughout generations, our national park regime is one of the best in the world. Our constraints on pollution and effluent disposal in different parts of the country. So there really is a pretty good looking after place people, which is a story which, once again, makes me optimistic that when you think about the water quality issues, this populace of people elected a government who was talking about the difficulties of water in New Zealand, and that is really a democracy responding to pressure inside a country. And now that very same government is coming out and taking a very staunch position, sort of saying almost less cows and less high intensity dairying. And so I guess they're just evidence that over time we will look after place. The last one is probably, and you picked it up in your comments as well, is that we call it an ingenuity gene. It's not really an innovation sort of system per se, not like in Israel or something like that, where you have a whole system of venture capitalists and angel investors, all sorts of people that do a lot of innovation. But definitely the first stage of that journey, the ingenuity part of that journey, is very strong. And you sort of ask yourself, why is it like that way? Well, the interesting thing about New Zealand is one of the lowest hierarchy countries in the world. Us and Denmark and Israel are the three lowest hierarchy countries in the world. So why is that relevant to ingenuity? Because ultimately hierarchy is the thing that most interferes with creativity and the generation of ideas. And so this sense of a small country at the edge of the South Pacific being highly ingenious, be able to solve its problems, is a very, very strong part of our country story. And if you have a look, we know the long-term ones like the Hamilton jet and the electric fences and even the hypodermic syringe came out of New Zealand. Daylight saving came out of New Zealand. Peter Beck has just put rockets into space off Mahia Peninsula. I mean, that's not, we're the 11th country in the world to put rockets into space. That's not the story. The story is he's changed the paradigm of space exploration because he's got a small rocket and it goes a hell of a long way on the fuel system and the carbon fibre nature of that rocket. So he has completely innovated and being ingenious around space exploration. And not only that, but he got a lot of the technology, the carbon fibre technology from the America's Cup campaign. Gas-fired possum traps is another one that's taken the world by storm. So we've learned how to kill possums in this country and do it quite efficiently. There's a company called Soul Machines. There's hundreds of these companies. I'm just picking out a few. There's a company called Soul Machines in Auckland that came out of the Auckland University Engineering Department, where they figured out the thousands of emotions that be present in a human face, and they've converted that to an artificial intelligence interface, two-dimensional interface, that now Air New Zealand and banks and other organisations are starting to think about how this can be an interface between a machine and a person. And then, think about Xero. So what's the ingenuity around Xero? Well, they've made accounting fun. So, that's pretty amazing accomplishment, isn't it? So those are just a few examples. There's a book there called Number 8 Rewired, written by David Downs and a couple of others, that catalogues quite an amazing sort of history of ingenuity that's come out of this country. So there is something about the DNA here that does allow us to do things a little bit differently. So if those are the attributes, then what's the story? And we say, it's an island on the edge of the South Pacific, an ingenious, creative nation caring for people and place and planet. And there's something about the fact that a small, young country, I think someone mentioned the sort of youthful part, a small, young country on the edge of the South Pacific coming up with these quite amazing set of attributes born out of the oldest democracy in the world. So, just didn't think this is all about us just having drunk the Kool-Aid. We were actually talking to a guy called Jack Ma. Jack Ma is the founder and chairman of Alibaba, which is a $500 billion e-commerce company based out of China. It's one of the biggest e-commerce engines in the world. He owns Alipay, which is the biggest payment system in the world. So he said to us, New Zealand's not just one of the best countries in the world, it's one of the best countries for the world. And so that's quite a very, very interesting positioning for us. So we're sitting on a country here that's not just good for itself, because that's actually a little bit pointless, just being good for yourself. It's a country that does things that are actually good for the world. And I think that's a fantastic sort of country positioning for a country to have. Of course, we've got an icon that's connected to this story. And you have to thank New Zealand sports people for being the curators and champions of this icon. It's sort of right back to the 1880 Māori All Blacks. When one warrior dies, another rises to take its place. When one fern dies, another rises to take its place. And so this has become a very cool icon. Didn't make it onto the flag, but a very cool icon. And seems to have gone quite viral. And I think, as I say, sports people have had a huge amount to do with this. In fact, my favourite one was in the 2012 Olympics, when there was a nice bit of guerrilla marketing. If you've been to London to New Zealand House, it's sort of got a really premium positioning, and this character put the fern on a massive big drop-down banner and dropped it off the edge of New Zealand House. But the really smart thing is that when the cameras were on the beach volleyball, I don't know why beach volleyball gets lots of hits, but it does. So the camera beyond the beach volleyball was this big fern sitting on New Zealand House. There's been some fantastic guerrilla marketing over the years, and that's a fern and a symbol and an icon that seems to have good resonance. So what we do after having done the research and thinking that that icon is very powerful, so what's the storytelling device? Because I've spent 10 minutes sort of saying what the story is, but that's not the snappy sort of campaign or storytelling device that you need. So we converted that into a thing called Open Spaces, Open Hearts, and Open Minds. And then we did a video a couple of years ago. We've seen it before, but I just thought I'd show it to you now. And it works. Very cool.
Welcome to the country of open spaces. Where nature bursts and flows. Where the elements come alive. Where there is room to breathe. And places to find. Welcome to the country of open hearts. Where care for the land and people is genuine. Where life is for living. Where time spent together is never time wasted. Where lasting partnerships are formed. Where strangers are treated as friends. And memories are treasured forever. Welcome to the country of open minds. Where learning is embraced and opinions valued. Where freshness is championed and quality prized for the world to enjoy. Where nature inspires incredible thinking. Where ingenuity drives innovation and productivity. Where big ideas are born every day and new technologies are perfected. where the impossible becomes real. And where every sunrise inspires the extraordinary. Welcome to the country of open spaces, open hearts, and open minds. Together, we can do amazing things.
Cool, nice, eh? So does that feel like your country? Yeah. So that's sort of the general sort of positioning of the New Zealand story. And that one there is a couple of years old now, so you can see it's a bit dated in parts. You can see some of those All Blacks. But we're now just doing an update now, which has got a slightly different format, and we've dialed up quite a few sports people like Stephen Adams and Lydia Ko have all come to the party and started to tell sort of ingredients of the story, how they see it. But it's still the same basic three pillars that we're working with. But as I said at the beginning, this is not about branding, this is about storytelling. And when we first embarked on this exercise, we got a bit of advice from Rob Fife, who was then the Chief Executive of Air New Zealand, who's actually a fantastic storyteller. And he said, look, the thing here is to seed storytelling is not to tell a story, because there's actually lots and lots of stories that run all over New Zealand. So over the last few years, we've been seeding lots and lots of different types of stories, but sort of running off the same idea set and all using the iconic sort of symbol of the fern. So you've had, a meat story, you've had a fishing story, you've had an immigration story, you've had an investment story. You've had, this last week was Tech Week, amazing week in New Zealand last week, and they produced a tech story called Upstarters. So these stories are sort of drawing on the same essential truths of the country, but they are dialing up different perspectives about it to create particular sets of meaning around sectors of New Zealand. So that really sort of made me turn to the question of New Zealand sport. Because, you are, really a crucial part of New Zealand, but the question here is, what's your story? What's the story that you want to tell? Do you want to tell a story? That's an important decision for you collectively to make. Is there a halo effect that you want to generate amongst yourselves by drawing on the same set of meaning? And if so, who is that halo effect for? Is it for a domestic or is it for an international audience? So, do you want to create this coherency in your storytelling? And if so, what would that story be? So what I'd like to do now is just seed a couple of ideas there, and then once again we're going to hit the tables again, and this time we're going to do it through a sport lens. And we're going to ask you the question, if you're thinking about the story of New Zealand sport, what is the story that you would like to tell, and what are the essential ingredients of that story? But a couple of teasers first. The first one is the New Zealand Story Group do all these sort of social media clips and little, I think they're called videoettes or something, just little small video clips that dial up particular parts of the story. This is the America's Cup one, and in particular it's really America's Cup seen from an ingenuity lens. And you could tell America's Cup from an integrity lens as well if you wanted to, probably even from a looking after the environment lens. But this one here is America's Cup from an ingenuity lens. Check it out.
How to win yachting's greatest prize by riding a bike? The America's Cup, attracting big countries with big budgets since 1851. Until Emirates Team New Zealand turned up, that is. They didn't have big money, just big ideas, like plastic hulls, crazy keels, and catamarans. But can big ideas really trump billions? We were going to find out. Because with Kiwis, high performance starts with putting their minds into gear first. And their minds were on grinding. Grinding produces the hydraulic power needed to raise and lower the foils, pull in the huge wing sail, and keep the boat flying. So thinking from a different perspective, they came up with an idea with legs, muscular ones. They figured pedaling the grinders would produce much more power. And they certainly weren't wrong, because switching from arm power to pedal power helped them win the old mug. For a third time, we might add. Like to see the land that inspires such inventive passion? We know a place.
So you can see the sort of idea there, can't you? It draws from the same broad pool of attributes, but it's sharpening up on one particular dimension, which is the ingenuity dimension. And a big part of the America's Cup story is about that sort of really amazing ingenuity of small budgets, which is a big part of our country story. The last one I'll show you before you get to work again is one that we actually did with Sport New Zealand. I remember the phone call from Peter when he said, geez, we've got the Rio Olympics coming up, should we cobble something together? I said, what's your story? Oh, I'm not sure. So anyway, we used the New Zealand story material and some other footage that we had and put together this story here. A lot of people in the room might have seen this, but just have a look at it again. And this is the story that was told, the Sport New Zealand story that was told at Rio.
Mate atu he te tekura. Ara mai he te tekura.
When one fern frond dies, another emerges. The New Zealand silver fern represents the strength, resilience, and determination. It is a source of inspiration for all New Zealanders. Worn with pride and respect by our athletes on the world stage. A symbol that connects sport, our people, and our land. Welcome to the country of open spaces, where the entire country is our sports field, where we play, participate, and challenge ourselves in sport and active pursuits, as wide and varied as the landscapes we treasure. Welcome to the country of open hearts, where a passion for sport is passed down from one generation to the next. And the coaches, supporters, and volunteers are as celebrated as the players. A nation where the team is valued as much as the individual. And how we win is just as important as the victory itself. Welcome to the country of open minds, where a culture of resourcefulness and innovation gives our athletes an edge, and locally developed technology leads the way. We are saying it can't be done only makes the challenge more compelling, and a willingness to break with convention has led to remarkable victories. Welcome to New Zealand, a true sporting nation.
So, do you recognise that story? So, let's get to work there again. So that's a bit of a teaser to try and think about your own story. So, back to the groups. We've got the last 15 minutes we're going to spend on this. Okay. So, once again, think yourself independently. 4 words that describe the key sort of attributes of the New Zealand sports story, and then as a group, try and land on those attributes. There's one difference this time, though. When you go to your group, the first question you're going to answer is that, do you need a coherent story of New Zealand sport? Is the first question. And the second question, if so, then what are the key attributes that you're dialing up? Okay, so 3 parts. Your individual ones, answer the question as a group, and then your 4 attributes, or 3 or 4 attributes. Out a bit here. So I think let's try and we'll get a bit on the floor, and then we might get a bit of, if you want to ask questions or challenge, then please do. So let's, bit of order. It's all right. Order. It's all right, we'll get there.
Okay. You want to go?
Yeah, these guys here look really alert and ready. So, so first of all, the question is, do you think we should tell a coherent story as the first? And then if yes, then what are some of your words you're dialing up?
I'm not quite sure we answered that question, but we all responded to the video. We're saying yes. My table
says
yes.
Yes, right.
And one factor that we pretty much all came up with was passionate, and also something about determination. Competitiveness came up, and also patriotism, and some connection with the environment in which you're doing the activity.
The physical environment, or
yeah.
Fantastic. Over here.
We had a whole range. Pride was one that was just me, really. But I just felt that.
Now, obviously, the less you have, the more powerful it is.
But yeah, just because
like
that related to high performance pride and national pride, and then community pride, and then self pride, self achievement through sport. So, and we talked about humble, that humble aspect of New Zealanders, and integrity. Opportunities as well was another one.
Okay, behind us. What about you guys? Over here.
Great. Yes, coherent strategy that reflects diversity, breadth of experience and opportunity from community right through to elite. And there was one other thing, which was accessibility or diversity. So within that video, we didn't see any of our amazing Paralympians.
Oh, cool. Yep.
Okay, over here.
So we had this word's hyphenated, living heritage, accessibility, passion, and for a fourth one, tough.
Okay, right.
Sport's tough or you're tough?
All round.
All round.
You guys over here.
So inclusive, we've got integrity and grit. And telling the story, we think there's two stories. One is within New Zealand, and that's very much about the community and volunteers and everything there. Outside New Zealand, it tells its own story with our achievements, but there's a different story that we should be telling within.
Two more, maybe? Yep.
We took a slightly wider lens and focused on recreation, so we came up with words like...
Are you yes for a start, though?
Yes, and.
Yes, and. Ooh, clever.
Well-being, community and whānau, fun lifestyle, physical activity, and innovative and ingenious.
These guys are keen.
There you go, Arthur.
Well, only keen in that we spent all the time debating whether we should have the story and never got onto the points. And the reason was it was around two different stories. And one being based around the value of sport and a story that encourages and gets people within New Zealand active. We agreed that's something that we definitely have to do. We did see value in a story that is based around that pride or feeling good about the country. So though it was an externally focused story, it was actually for the benefit of the domestic market.
Okay. Let's take one more.
One more. You guys over here.
Yeah, we had a number of potential answers. First of all, we said, or I said, hey, tangata, past that for the about the DNA, I suppose, of Kiwis. There's belief was a word that was there. Pride came up. Connectedness, the notion of, a small country, small group of people holding hands for maximum impact. And yeah, that was it. Yep.
Very cool. Oh well, I mean, just if you listen to just what's come back, it's quite a strong view that you do want a story, although there's some nuances around that. Maybe not. But there is that was the weight of the opinion. It's a very broad story. It's very, very hard to distill down what the essence of that story is. And good storytelling, you need to get to the essence. What's that point of difference that distinguishes you? And I think whether you're telling it internally or externally really matters as well. The pride came through quite strongly. Passion came through. And this diversity, inclusiveness, and this connection with the community and participation also came through very strongly as well. And a bit of innovation and ingenuity. So there's definitely the essence of a story there. If you were going to create your own story, it would require a lot of curation. In some ways, creating and curating the story is as powerful as the story itself. That's why I said it's quite an effort to do it. The sectors have gone ahead and created their own story. In fact, to put an enormous amount of work into. It's not something that you enter into lightly, and you have to be convinced that there's some value there for you as a sector, some value that trickles down to you as individuals, to your teams, to the communities, and everyone that's involved. So look, that's the end of the exercise today. And actually, what I'd be really interested in doing, and I'm sure that Peter would as well, those notes you've written up, you just put them on the edge of your table, because that effectively becomes raw material, and it's really good raw material. And I think if you ran a scan over those, you would be able to distill out some quite good themes there. So can someone at the table just take responsibility for writing it up? And in fact, just if you could put it down on the speakers table there when you go to morning tea, afternoon tea, just chuck them in a pile on the reserved speakers table down the front. That'd be great. So just to summarise then, that's the presentation. I think what I'm saying is that storytelling is not about persuading people who you want to be. It's about authentically shining a light on who you are. And so distilling out the authentic truth of who you are and what you're like as a sports community becomes the really key thing. I mean, I think New Zealand sport's got an amazing story to tell. And I think, you are at the centre of our country story and have been for a long time. So we've built today a mosaic of what that story could be. It's some great work by everyone. But I think, the potential is out there. It's just up to you about whether you want to take that step or not. So those are my words. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Cheers.